Hi, and welcome to this, our season zero of the Resilient Adult Podcast.
Yes, we had a plan and it flew out the window, stolen as many people's plans have been by the pandemic and subsequent act of being trapped in our houses 45 minutes away from each other. Our goal was to start a podcast in June, talking all about how we can support ourselves and each other in becoming more flexible and resilient. Then we realized now is the perfect time for this.
In fact, if there's ever been a time people need resilience, it's now. And so here we are, even though among the many skills we have, technology is not one of our biggest ones. We have worked our way through this and fumbled into being able to record this remotely, which was, again, not the plan. And we just want to reach out and help people going through this time when we're not just adulting, we're adulting on steroids.
This is like special levels, crank it up to 11. We don't know how to do this. None of us have ever lived through anything like this. When you add into account other skills that we may not have developed, and now we're having to manage those skills when the playing board doesn't even have all the pieces. Um, it's tricky, and this is totally a beta run. We are not sure of our tech. We've never done a podcast before, and we are totally off script. But hopefully, we can also offer some things that are useful and a little bit of fun, and at the very least, make everyone that's standing in their kitchen in their pajamas trying to figure out how to cook a meal for the third time in a day, for the 15th day in a row, a little less alone.
So, what is the Resilient Adult Podcast? Well, basically, I'm Marissa, and Rachel, my co host, is here.
Hello.
And we are two people who just noticed that there is a strange cultural trend happening in America. We're Americans, we're from the Midwest, and that is our point of cultural reference and knowledge. But a trend that is happening among our tribe, essentially, of people not being raised to be not successful, but competent adults. We're being raised to be successful, but not competent. And what I mean by that is we don't teach domestic skills, we don't teach conflict resolution, we don't teach relationship building, we don't teach all of those little things that make a life full and complete and make you feel like a person who knows what you're doing most of the time. And this cultural change, this lack of the way that we're parenting kids and the way that we have grown up at this point, frankly, because this kind of started late 60s, early 70s. So I'm what I call a grandpa millennial. I'm just on that cusp of the millennial generation. And so I'm probably one of the first generations to really be raised in this manner. And what it is basically you have a whole bunch of people who think adulting is a verb and not an identity. So this podcast is about exploring the history of how we got to this cultural moment, exploring how to parent our children better. And for those of us who were raised this way, who are those children who are now struggling to be grown-ups, how do you parent yourself when you didn't get that stuff as a kid? How do you move forward? And we're going to pull in stuff from our lives journeys, but we're also going to pull in some stuff from our actual expertise. I work in finance, but my main thing is I'm a life coach. I tutor and I help people figure out their finances, and a whole lot of that is psychology and responsibility. And then Rachel,
I teach middle school. I have been a teacher for more than 20 years at this point. And this podcast sort of came about because I was bemoaning what I considered some basic skills in terms of responsibility or time management that my students were struggling with. And Marissa's like, hey, I work with adults that are struggling with those same things. And then I realized that I know adults that are struggling with those same things because our parents were really great at teaching us to be academically successful or financially successful. But we kind of fell through the cracks on meaningful self care. And when I say self care, I don't mean take a bubble bath or get your nails done. I mean, feeding yourself and living in a home that you can be proud of, regardless of what it costs, because you can change a light bulb and mop your floor without feeling helpless and overwhelmed. Um, I know so many adults with multiple college degrees that don't know how to hem a pair of pants. And between just that realization and the realization that these are skills we can learn, they're just things we don't know. So here we are.
So that's basically the Resilient Adult podcast in a 5 minute time frame. So for this special season zero surviving quarantine edition, we're not going to explore the history and all of that jazz. We're going to be in survival mode. So we are going to talk about basic domestic skills. We're going to talk about some basic financial management during a crisis and during what is looking to be definitively a terrible recession, probably a depression of some kind, a lot of economists believe. And we're going to talk about how to approach that in your life in a resilient manner, in a manner that gives you the flexibility to adapt to adjusting circumstances and to be um, confident of your ability to work through whatever life throws at you.
And full disclosure at this point, I think we want to be very clear that we are very community oriented. We're going to do some talking about mental health and managing the stress of feeling trapped inside the four walls of your house.
Yeah,
But
forewarning, we are very pro mental health care at the Resilient Adult. We are very pro psychology. And to a certain degree, we are pro medication.
we are not pro placing your personal needs, wants, and desires ahead of the needs, wants, and desires of every other person or society and calling that self care. We have a responsibility to ourselves, but we also have a responsibility to others, particularly in this crisis, to act in ways that are meaningful for us while still being caring for our community. Um,
In, in fact, a lot of what we posit as resilience is accepting the basic fact of human nature that we are social animals, just like dogs and wolves and ants. We are meant to work in social units as a team, and we're psychologically, it's deficient for us when we try to go it alone. And so we take that as a baseline for human health and happiness that you need to be part of a strong community.
So, one of the things that we actually haven't rehearsed is our opening and closing. I feel like we've done a decent job of introducing ourselves and our plan here. We'd certainly love to hear any kind of feedback and look for us again soon.
All right, sounds great. And talk later, Rachel.
See you soon. Well, sort of.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.